On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk small home theaters, Hunter Douglas's new PowerView 3, and alternate user interfaces. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 346, 2 qubits.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Chief, the global leader in commercial AV mounting solutions.
Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week I am pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Mr. Jason Knott. He's the Chief Content Officer at CE Pro. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Then we have Scott Stevenson. He is the Director of Product Motorization for Hunter Douglas. How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to be on again.
Thank you both for joining us. All right, gentlemen, we're going to kick this off really quickly with a story that comes to us from Residential Systems. Home theater, they're doing a whole home theater week where they're doing a ton of stuff, a ton of features on home theater. And this is 10 tips for designing a small home theater. She hits, and this is Diana Jameson from Valencia, who posted this one. She hits about 10 points. And the one that kind of stood out to me and kind of made me go, yeah, you'd never think about this in a small theater, that she put as number one was that risers are a must. She gets into changing your options on seating design, how to do simple things like throw the rack outside of that room, mount everything in the walls, and things like built-in lighting, as in nothing on the walls, because again, it's a small space, et cetera, et cetera. Jason, I want to start with you on this one. When we as an industry look at small spaces, typically we won't go full build out into a small space because, well, it's a small space. But do we overlook the efficiency and the opportunity that lies in those small spaces? Because you can still fit a ton in there, and because your customer may be limited on space, a lot of times you can actually build that scope creep up. You can grow that scope creep because you're actually limited in what you can put into that space.
You know, I was actually visiting an integrator down in Connecticut just last month, Hometronics Lifestyles, and he's got a little showroom where he has a kind of a three separate areas, and two of them are small theaters, just as being described in this article. And I thought it was interesting because one of them, he's actually even using as the sound component that new Sony Bravia TV where the glass itself is the speaker. There was no separate speaker. I was like, where's the sound bar? I'm looking in the ceiling. I'm looking everywhere. He goes, no. And it was a setup that was literally like a 4 by 5 foot room. I mean, it was tiny, with one chair, a little couch, maybe like a side alcove to some room. And he goes, in this case, I could have this TV, and it sounded great. When you're sitting close to it, it sounded great. Whereas I don't know how many times we've been somewhere where you can't hear the TV because it doesn't have a sound bar. But when you're sitting that close, it was interesting. So no, I think some integrators, to your question, Matt, are getting the sense of what they can do in these small spaces. Couple of things I'll point out that I thought this was a really good article is they were talking about risers and then slim seating. I'll even say short seating because you see if you're going to have a riser scenario, you can't have a tall back seat that's going to hide that view from somebody from behind. And also there's like an acoustical element to that. The other thing was, I think one of the tips was use corner to corner as much as you possibly can. So I was curious as to that meant, I'm guessing that you either have the ability to put a perforated screen with audio behind it, or you were having to go all in ceiling on the audio, which I see more and more. I've been in dealer showrooms with big projection screen setups, and they're going fully in ceiling on the speakers, which is interesting.
Well, and again, in a smaller space, you can get away with that a whole lot easier because that distance isn't there. If you've got an 8-foot tall or 9-foot tall ceiling, if your speaker is, 6-7 feet away, but in the ceiling, it's that angle. Obviously, it changes. And yes, Peter Aylett, you can send me hate mail on that. It's fine, but you can get away with it a whole lot easier. Scott, do smaller spaces allow integrators to kind of show off their creative chops a little bit better? Because again, bigger spaces, it's easy to do that really big focal wall down the side because you've got so much real estate. Should we be going after this as a driver?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, to your point, it does allow them to kind of show off some creativity and figure out how to make something work in a small space that somebody who's got the giant space that they're working in doesn't even have to think about. And certainly I've talked to enough integrators that are focused their business on large large cities with a lot of high-rise type stuff. They're by requirement experts in working in small spaces. It might be a multi-million-dollar condo, but it's not that big, and you got to find a spot for probably a very small rack. You're not going to get a full-size rack into a space like that. All kinds of different creative solutions that the guys who work in the big cities do all the time. And I think that, sometimes for the folks who are used to, the 12,000 square foot mansions, they don't even have to think about stuff like that. But I do think there's an opportunity here for integrators to kind of show off what they can do and really expand the potential market for that kind of dedicated theater space, because a lot of people simply don't have the room for it.
To your point, Scott, really quick, just you're bringing up just the cleanliness of the wiring. I talked to a lot of integrators who specifically say their best technicians in terms of wiring are the guys who came from automotive or yachts, because the space is so tight, exactly to your point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, if you look beyond our channel for a minute, companies like Restoration Hardware and Crate and Barrel, they have entire divisions that make specific solutions for small spaces. And you can go in there and you can buy a massive couch from RH, and then you can buy his baby brother that fits in, normal size homes.
I know Nationwide Buying Group is bringing their tiny house solution to CEDIA Expo. So they're going to have a tiny house in their booth. They've had it at Primetime in the past, so it's loaded with technology. One of those, that's kind of the new trend, is these tiny houses. You see the TV shows and stuff like that, but they're going to have one at CEDIA Expo in a few weeks.
Well, yeah, and there's some integrators that, at least that I know, and now I'm blanking on their name, but Mel and GIF in the UK, they bespoke home cinemas. They work not exclusively, but because it's the UK and they work a lot in London, they do a ton of theaters in, and I'll use meters because that's what they send me when they send me stuff, which will mean nothing to you guys. But they'll do tons of spaces that are 3x4 meters, which is essentially 12 by 16, give or take. Or sorry, 9x12, I should say. They'll do tons of spaces that are that small just because that's all that's available. So check out their Instagram. They got some cool stuff. All right, let's change topics for a second because I don't want to go down the tiny home chain. Nice try. This comes to us from CE Pro. Hunter Douglas delivers an expanded control drivers library with the new PowerView Gen 3 platform for their shades. Scott, you can read through this. Tons of good information in it. But Scott, let's just kick it off with you because you're here. Tell us what's new with Gen 3 of PowerView and what the expanded driver options, how does that affect integrators? How does that affect dealers?
So Gen 3 is really a complete overhaul of the PowerView platform. We just kind of started from the ground up and built something from scratch as opposed to trying to build on what we had. We recognized that what we had was what was going to take us into the future. It's built on a Bluetooth Low Energy communications platform. We get several really nice benefits with BLE, but one of the great benefits from an integration standpoint is every single shade 8 times a second reports what's going on with it, what its position is, what's going on. So like literally if the shade is moving, we're getting, I'm at 98%, I'm at 97%, I'm at 96%, 8 times every second. And so from an integration standpoint, it makes it so much easier. Of course, whether it doesn't matter whether it's Control 4 or Crestron or whatever, everybody wants, you want the shade slider that when you walk up to it is always going to tell you exactly where that shade is. If if you're away from home, you want to know what's going on. So doing the integrations became so much easier with having that constant real-time two-way feedback, never having to go out and just kind of ask a shade what was going on with it or anything like that. So it really expanded our capabilities from an integration standpoint. In the past, with the PowerView Gen 2, the only control system that was out there that had the full two-way shade control, actual reporting of shade position was Control 4. With Crestron and Milan and others, it was really just scene execution only. And
Yep.
you could go into their system, you could execute one of the PowerView scenes, but you weren't going to getting that real-time feedback. And even if even with Control 4, we had to tell people, well, don't use your PowerView remote because it'll get the system out of sync. It didn't know when that remote had been used. Now with Gen 3, it's all just, like I said, we always know exactly what's going on with that shade. Doesn't matter whether you told Google to have it move, picked up your remote, did it through your PowerView app, did it through your control system. It's made integrations so much easier.
That's fantastic. I'm going to read a quote from you to lead into my question to Jason. And I quote, PowerView Gen 3 is engineered to take the guesswork out of specifying smart shades. Jason, are shades still this complicated thing for most integrators? Have we figured this out yet? Because I've been in the shade business for way too many years. Scott's obviously been in there for quite a while. We know a lot of dealers that this has become a huge vertical for them. But I also know a lot of dealers who are petrified of playing with shades because they think it's just ridiculously complicated. Is that misguided? Or we've got to be to the point where we can figure out how to measure a window.
You just hit the nail on the head in terms of the most complicated part of the project, which is the mismeasurement. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with maybe just poor communication or lack of communication with their builder and the architect, and knowing whether they've put in the proper specifications for a pocket versus a fascia type, or it's going to be exposed roller shade or whatever, and I was mentioning earlier, I think I know every integrator I know probably has a set of mismeasured shades sitting in their inventory somewhere. But the reason this market is getting more important is this continued growth of the intersection of design with integration. You look at this category, and then I'll throw lighting in with that. Lighting and shades have really become the key categories where integrators are working arm in arm with interior designers. And it's breaking down the barriers that interior designers have about technology in the home through these window shade coverings that have, beautiful fabrics and colors and all sorts of selection criteria, along with lighting, of course, that have the same kind of decorative elements that the designers can be part of. So we just finished really quick. I'll just throw this out as a plug. It's going to be in our October issue, which will debut at the show. We did our lighting a shade deep dive in CE Pro. And according to the data, 31% of projects last year had motorized shades in them. So almost 1/3 of projects had motorized shade involved in it. The average shade install had 10 shades, and the price point was $1,625 per shade. So there's you do the math, that's $16,000 added to the potential to a project by adding shades in. And again, looking at, I'm not even going to get into the MDU opportunity. If you're in the MDUs and you're not doing shades, think how much money you're leaving on the table there. So it will continue to grow, I believe. And you're right. We just need to make sure that everybody, I think, communicates better with their builder and the architect to make sure that they are measuring it correctly.
And from the standpoint of the fear aspect of it and whatever, that's one of the reasons that we offer our HDIS, Hunter Douglas Installation Services. But we've got I don't know, hundreds of seasoned installers out there that our dealers can use. And these are guys who are. I think one of the things that's always been a challenge for the industry is shades are not something that they're typically measuring and installing every single day. So, it's fine in the normal situations, but you get into certain nuances and it can be easy to mess up. And that's why, we offer the service then to our dealers that says, hey, if you want to use our installers, you can. And then we're responsible if somebody screws up that measurement. If it gets measured wrong, it's on us, not you as the dealer.
And just learn how to read your tape measures. Come on, people. I said it so you guys didn't have to, but seriously, learn how to read your tape measures. It's not that complicated.
And there's they make these things called laser measuring tools too. So
now granted, we've had a kid working with us this summer, and it was a week in before I realized that he did not know how to read a tape measure. So we had a little school session, and ours can be more complicated because you can get them in inches, you can get them in centimeters, you can get them in both. And he multiple times would tell me it was 3 millimeters to go, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's not how we do it here.
Well, I always love when my wife and I are working on a project. I say, well, what she might be doing the measuring, and it's always 1 below 5/8. So instead of the actual, she doesn't want to get into the actual 16th or 32nd.
The actual
one
fraction.
below. It's 3 below half. So it works.
This summer, I have more times than I ever have in my life. I've said something like, okay, go to the half and then add 3 lines.
Yeah.
Come on, kid, you can do it. You got it. Granted, just to tease my wife, who never listens to anything I ever do, so she'll never hear this. We were looking at some windows, and I had a client who was pulling some out, and I had one that never got replaced when we did our windows. And I'm like, I think it'll fit. Honey, can you get me a measurement? It's sitting in the garage just before we go to pull it out. Just go take a quick measurement. And we have tape measures everywhere. It wasn't, hey, he's got all the tape measures in the truck. She walked up to the window in the bathroom and did, you may not see it, like did this with her hand and like, okay, it's to there. And then walked to the garage and put her, and I'm like, no, honey, no.
2 cubits.
Tape measure, babe.
Wasn't that the cubit, the distance from the nose to the tip of the...
Yeah, it was cubit.
Yeah.
It's 4 fingers and... No. All right. Let's hit our last story of the day before someone forwards this to my wife and gets me in trouble. I'm talking to you, Stephen. Residential Tech Today, finding alternative user interfaces for smart homes, from Jay Basin. Jay was going through a deep dive to look at different options opposed to the standard ones that are in the channel for control throughout the house, and came across a variety of alternative user interfaces that will trigger something in your house. Read through the article. He covers a couple of products like this Shelly Button 1, Aotex Nano Mote Quad, the Moe's Scene Switch, the Tiba Turn 2, hopefully I'm butchering a couple of these names, a Cube that uses accelerators, the Fabaro Swipe, which I've actually used and is a pretty cool product. Long and short, he's looking at a variety of different solutions to give you some additional control throughout your house. Jason, do we need alternate control options? Like, is this really a thing, or is this more DIY fodder of, hey, look what I can do with my smart home?
So this is an interesting article because some of those do look very cool. The bottom line is it's got to work. And I was recently in an integrator's showroom, and in his showroom is a full voice control setup, and it works 75% of the time, 80% of the time. And when I asked him about it, he said, he goes, and this is a company that he's doing, I think the smallest job home he's working on is $8 million. He goes, I can't put it in the house. I can't put something in the house that doesn't work 100% of the time. And that includes voice control. So no offense to all the voice control people out there, he won't do it because it doesn't work 100% of the time. And I would think the same conclusion to these. These are really cool, and I think they're neat and unique, and I'm sure they're talking points. And but if they work, I'm all for it. I think integrators should go for it, and especially if it adds that design element. But if it doesn't work 100% of the time, they shouldn't.
Scott, do these solutions, do these options, does this thought process, is this showing us the future, or is this more, again, somebody who threw something on, not GoFundMe, but I'm blanking on the name of the startup funding service, but somebody who had an idea, found somebody to give them some money, brought it to market, and now it's languishing on the clearance shelf of Home Depot.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm getting hate mail for this.
No, I mean, definitely when I read through that article, there were a couple of them that I was like, I could see a real use for something like this. And then others that I was definitely struggling to think of, why would I use that over the control touch points that are part of any of the control systems that are really part of our industry. And I think as an integrator, you have to be thinking about what value are you bringing to your client, but also what value are you providing to your own company in terms of doing some of these kinds of solutions, and are you really going to make money by doing by doing some of that kind of stuff? I mean, it did seem like, a lot of types of things that you could probably go on Amazon and buy. Are you going to get adequately compensated for the setup time, the time to program it? It's not a native part of the system. And then to Jason's point, what if it's not working perfectly 100% of the time? Then now you're on the hook for trying to support it from a company that probably isn't set up to provide support to the channel like this channel expects and needs. And so those would be my concerns. I mean, some of them, I could see, like the one that was just one big button. I mean, there's times I've thought, boy, it'd be nice to have something like that on my bedside table. If you just want to kind of be able to, in the middle of the night, go over and smack something to have the lights turn on, at an appropriate level for the middle of the night, rather than fumbling around with a full-blown keypad that might have 4 or 6 buttons on it that you're trying to get to the right one. So I mean, there's things that I think can provide value, but again, is it worth it to an integrator to spend their time doing that?
All I'm going to ask is, if you go down this vein, to anyone listening, please, for the love of God, buy a labeler and label what the heck the stupid button does. Because we have a hard enough time in the channel getting people to engrave their keypads and label things in general. This stuff reminds me of, I can't remember who it was, Jason, maybe you'll recall this. There was a manufacturer who brought a proximity sensor that was supposed to go under a kitchen countertop. And it supported like 4 or 5 gestures where you hovered over like an inch over the table, and you were supposed to be able to turn lights up by moving your hand one way, pause the music, turn the music up, skip the song. And I remember doing an interview with them, and they were sold. They were bought, like they were ready to go. They thought this was the coolest thing ever. And I said, okay, cool. My wife has a hard time with light switches in the house. And this is before I had kids. And now, good gosh, kids never turn switches off. Who is going to explain how this thing works to literally anyone other than me? Because no one will know how to use this. And he's like, oh, no, well, you could just print something up and put it. Like, that.
Well, there's a reason all the gesture control demos at CES are always in enclosed booths.
Yes.
Because they're like, if there's any sort of a background, somebody walking by while somebody's doing that gesture as you described, it throws the whole thing off. So
it's a great concept, but
and heavens knows, Matt, you and I don't need any more gestures from our wives.
No, I get enough, my friend.
The hand gestures we already get from them, right?
No comment. All right, gentlemen, before we get ourselves into any more trouble, thank you so much for joining us. Jason, if people want to connect with you, learn more about CE Pro, stop by. Do you guys have a booth at Expo? Or are you just roaming?
We do. Yep, we're going to have a booth at Expo. I'm excited to see everybody there. So they can obviously go to cepro.com. You hopefully get the print magazine for free every month. We're going to be at CDA Expo with a booth. I myself am going to be doing 7 different sessions on the Smart Stage too. So if you seek me out, I would love to say hi.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Mr. Stevenson, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Hunter Douglas, swing by your booth, where can they do all of those fancy things?
Yeah, definitely come see us at the show. We've got 2 booths this year. They're right next to each other, 6027 and 7027. The 7027 is the main booth, has all the PowerView Gen 3 products that we've launched this year. The other one has got something special that we're going to be debuting at the show, and I definitely think people are going to want to check it out. So stop by. I'll certainly be there. You can also, of course, reach out to me directly. You can find me on LinkedIn or scott.stevenson@hunterdouglas.com.
Excellent. Thank you again for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at MattDScott and most other social platforms. I'm even on LinkedIn somewhere. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.